Impact of Obesity, done by the Arouca Seventh-day Adventist Church, presented by Camille Diet. Good day, everyone. Objectives: to investigate the biological impact of obesity on persons, to state the psychological impact obesity has on individuals, and also to determine the social impact obesity has on individuals. According to CDC, obesity results from the energy imbalance that occurs when a person consumes more calories than their body burns. Obesity is a serious public health issue because it is associated with some of the leading causes of death in the US and worldwide, including diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some types of cancer. However, we tend to view obesity as a one-way street, where the belief is someone who is fat or obese is so due to overeating or gluttony. We will soon find out that this way of thinking, handed down from generation to generation, is not always the case. Another false perception we as people tend to gravitate to is that obesity only affects one's physical condition. This also can be further from the truth. Obesity equally affects one's mental and social status. In this brief presentation, we will take a look at the biological, psychological, and social impact of obesity. In recent decades, obesity reached epic proportions in populations whose environments promote physical inactivity and increased consumption of high-calorie foods. However, not all people living in such environments will become obese, nor will all obese people have the same health problems. These differences can be seen in groups of people with the same racial or ethnic background, and even within families. Genetic changes in human populations occur too slowly to be responsible for the obesity epidemic. Nevertheless, the variation in how people respond to the same environment suggests that genes do play a role in the development of obesity. How does genes influence obesity? Genes give the body instructions for responding to changes in its environment. Some studies have compared obese and non-obese people for variation in genes that could influence behaviors, such as a drive to overeat or a tendency to be sedentary, or metabolism, such as diminished capacity to use dietary fats as fuel or an increased tendency to store body fat. These studies have identified variants in several genes that may contribute to obesity by increasing hunger and food intake. Rarely, a clear pattern of inherited obesity within a family is caused by a specific variant or a single gene, also known as monogenic obesity. Most obesity, however, probably results from complex interaction among multiple genes and environmental factors that remain poorly understood. Multifactorial obesity. Psychological impact. Psychological consequences of being obese or overweight can include lowered self-esteem and anxiety, and more serious disorders such as depression and eating disorders such as binge eating, bulimia, and anorexia. Modern culture is singular in the way that it worships youthful, slim toned bodies. Within rare exceptions, only thin proportional bodies are considered sexy. Obese overweight people are looked down upon. It's easy to feel bad about oneself, to become depressed or anxious, or develop obsessions around eating control when one's culture make it clear that the way one appears is wholly undesirable. One doesn't have to be overweight to get into psychological trouble with eating. Either eating is pleasurable, and because this is true, all manner of people, fat and thin both, end up using eating as a ready source of emotional comfort when they are feeling stressed out. Depression. Previous research suggests a relationship between excess body weight and depression. Persons with extreme obesity, for example, are almost 5 times more likely to have experienced an episode of major depression in the past year as compared with those of average weight. The relationship between obesity and depression seems to be stronger for women than men, perhaps because of society's emphasis on thinness as characterized of female beauty. Eating disorders. Disordered eating is common among persons with obesity. Many patients presenting for weight loss treatment report that they engage in eating for emotional reasons. Others report having difficulty controlling the frequency they're eating, proportion size, or eating behavior in responding to bombardment of food cues from modern society. Somewhat surprising to some, only a small minority have formally recognized eating disorders. The most common eating disorder among persons with obesity is binge eating disorder. Binge eating disorder is characterized by the consumption of a large amount of food in a brief period of time, less than 2 hours, during which the individual experiences a loss of control. As a result, the individual eats much faster than normal until uncontrollably full, in absence of hunger, and often eats alone. After eating, the individual often reports disgust. To just summarize, it comes as no surprise that such stress induced eating leads to weight gain, which in turn leads to many people, especially women, to feel still worse about themselves, motivating still more stress based eating and additional weight gain. All too often, stress based comfort eating becomes a vicious cycle and downward spiral, which leads to depression. Social impact of obesity. Obesity stigma is ambiguous, with one recent study from a country in Western Europe showing that 18.7% of people with obesity experience stigma. For people with severe obesity, the figure was much higher, 38%. Individuals with obesity experience stigma from educators, employers, health professionals, the media, and even friends and family. Stigma is a fundamental cause of health inequalities, and obesity stigma is associated with significant physiological and psychological consequences, including increased depression, anxiety, and decreased self esteem. It can also lead to disordered eating, avoidance of physical activity, and avoidance of medical care. A little statistic showing children with obesity in Trinidad and Tobago. In Trinidad and Tobago, research has shown that a quarter, which is 25% of school-age children between the ages of 5 to 18, is overweight or obese. 1 in 4 children is overweight. 1/3 of our children so far have a cholesterol level over 200, according to WHO 2013. This country is the 5th fattest or obese nation in the world, according to a recent report from the Food and Agriculture Organization. Social impact on children. Obesity stigma hits children especially hard. The effects of weight bias and obesity stigma can be particularly severe for children. Studies indicate that school-age children with obesity experience a 63% chance of being bullied. When children and youth are bullied or victimized because of their weight by peers, family, and friends, it can trigger feelings of shame and lead to depression, low self-esteem, poor body image, and even suicide. To conclude, as a clearer understanding of the different impacts obesity has on an individual has been reached, we can now be more empathetic and understanding towards the challenges they face. We can keep them in constant prayer and also provide the necessary support system that is needed in each situation. These are my references, and this is the end of my presentation. Goodbye.